Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the English Globe. We're thrilled to have you here with us today. I'm Adam, your co-host, and alongside me, as always, is Julia. How are you doing today, Julia?
Hi, Adam. I'm doing really well, thank you. And hello to all of our listeners. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been following along for a while, we're so excited to have you here.
Yes, absolutely. And today, we're diving into a topic that's incredibly important for English learners, especially if you're just starting out or if you've been learning English but still feel nervous when it comes to speaking. We'll be talking about something that a lot of people struggle with, the fear of speaking English.
Oh yes, Adam. This is such a common issue. Many people, even those who have learned grammar, vocabulary and writing, still feel nervous or afraid when it's time to actually speak in English. I know I've seen this with students I've taught, where they feel so much pressure to be perfect and that fear holds them back.
That's right. And the fear of speaking English can really prevent you from making progress. But here's the good news. It's completely normal to feel nervous, and it's something you can overcome with practice and the right mindset.
Exactly. Overcoming the fear of speaking English isn't about being perfect. It's about being comfortable with making mistakes and learning through those experiences. But of course, it's easier said than done, right?
Definitely. And to help us break down this topic today, we have a very special guest joining us. He's a language coach who not only teaches English, but was once in the same position as many of our listeners. He had to learn English himself and understands firsthand what it's like to struggle with speaking. Please welcome Liam.
Welcome to the podcast, Liam.
Thank you so much, Adam and Julia. It's great to be here with both of you and with all of the listeners. I'm really excited to dive into this topic because, as you said, it's something I experienced myself when I was learning English.
We're so glad to have you, Liam. Before we jump into the strategies and tips for overcoming the fear of speaking, could you share a little bit about your background? What was your English learning journey like?
Of course, Adam. So, like many of your listeners, I started learning English as a second language. I was actually quite shy when I first began. I would study a lot, and I could understand English when I read it or listened to it. But when it came to speaking, that was a different story. I was afraid of making mistakes, afraid that people would laugh at my pronunciation or that they wouldn't understand me at all.
That's really relatable, Liam. I think a lot of people listening right now are nodding their heads because they've felt that same fear.
Exactly. But over time, I learned that making mistakes is part of the process, and the more I practiced speaking, the more confident I became. Now, I help others overcome their fear of speaking. And I can say that it's absolutely possible to get past that fear and speak English with confidence.
That's so inspiring, Liam. I love that you went from being an English learner yourself to now helping others with their language journey. And that's exactly why we wanted to have you on today's episode, because you understand the struggle from both sides as a learner and as a teacher.
Yes. And I think it's important for our listeners to know that even someone who's as confident as Liam is now once felt the same nerves that they might be feeling. It really shows that with the right mindset and some consistent practice, anyone can overcome this fear.
That's right, Julia. And that's what we're here to talk about today. How to push through those nerves, what strategies can help, and why making mistakes when speaking isn't something to be afraid of, but something to embrace.
So, if you've ever felt scared or nervous about speaking English, stay with us. We're going to give you practical tips, hear more about Liam's journey, and share some real-life advice on how to build your confidence when speaking.
And by the end of this episode, we hope you'll feel more motivated to start speaking English, even if it's just a few sentences, because every time you speak, you're improving.
That's so true, Adam. And just remember, everyone listening, you don't have to be perfect to speak English. In fact, nobody is perfect when they start learning a new language. It's all about progress, not perfection.
Absolutely. So, let's get started with today's topic. How to overcome the fear of speaking English. We're going to break it down step by step, talk about why this fear happens in the first place, and then dive into the strategies that will help you overcome it.
And by the end of the episode, we hope you'll have the tools and confidence you need to start practicing speaking English without fear.
Now that we've introduced the topic, let's dive a little deeper into some of the common fears that many English learners face when it comes to speaking. It's important to acknowledge that these fears are not unique. In fact, almost everyone who learns a new language experiences some form of anxiety or nervousness when speaking, and this can be caused by various factors. One of the most prevalent fears is the fear of making mistakes. Learners often feel like they need to be perfect before they can even say a word. They may be afraid that if they say something incorrectly, they'll embarrass themselves, or worse, that people will think they're not capable or intelligent. This fear can be paralyzing because it stops people from speaking altogether. They hold back because they're so worried about making an error, and as a result, they miss out on valuable speaking practice, which is essential for improving.
That's such a great point, Adam. The fear of making mistakes is something I've encountered with so many of my students. They often tell me that they're afraid to speak up in class or in conversations because they don't want to say the wrong thing. I think this fear stems from the fact that we've all been taught from a young age to avoid mistakes, whether it's in school, at work, or in life. But when it comes to learning a new language, mistakes are actually a good thing. They're part of the learning process. In fact, I always tell my students that the more mistakes they make, the faster they'll learn. But I understand how challenging it can be to let go of that fear.
Exactly, Julia. And another big fear, which is closely related, is the fear of being judged. A lot of learners feel that when they speak English, people are going to judge them for not speaking perfectly. They might worry that others will criticize their grammar, their accent, or their pronunciation. This fear of judgment can be really overwhelming, especially if someone has had a negative experience in the past. Maybe they were laughed at for their accent, or corrected harshly by a teacher or peer. Those kinds of experiences can make a person reluctant to speak in the future because they don't want to feel embarrassed again.
Yes, and that fear of judgment can be so powerful. I remember working with a student who had lived in an English-speaking country for over 5 years, but still refused to speak English unless it was absolutely necessary. When I asked her why, she told me that early on in her English learning journey, she had been mocked for her accent by a group of co-workers. Even though it had happened years ago, that experience had stayed with her and created this deep-rooted fear of speaking in public. It wasn't until we worked through those feelings that she was able to rebuild her confidence and start practicing speaking again. It just goes to show how much impact a negative experience can have on someone's willingness to speak.
That's a really powerful story, Julia, and it's such a common issue. The fear of being judged can sometimes come from external sources, like the experience you just described, but it can also come from within. Some learners are their own harshest critics. They set these incredibly high standards for themselves, and when they don't meet those standards, they become discouraged. This leads to a sense of insecurity about their abilities, which brings me to another common fear: insecurity about pronunciation. Many learners feel self-conscious about how they sound when they speak English. They worry that their accent will make it difficult for others to understand them, or that their pronunciation isn't good enough. This insecurity can stop them from speaking altogether, even if they have a solid grasp of vocabulary and grammar.
Yes, that's so true, Adam. I think pronunciation is a big area of concern for many learners, especially those who come from countries where English sounds are quite different from their native language. The truth is, Having an accent when speaking a new language is completely normal and, in fact, expected. But for a lot of learners, the goal is to sound as close to a native speaker as possible, which is a tough and often unrealistic standard to hold yourself to. I've had students who've worked incredibly hard on their pronunciation, but still feel insecure when speaking, which really holds them back from practicing in real-life situations. The fear of sounding different can be really intimidating.
It definitely can be, Julia. And what many learners don't realize is that most native speakers are very understanding when it comes to accents or slight mispronunciations. As long as you're communicating clearly and can be understood, that's what really matters. But I know it can be tough to let go of that fear. I'm curious, Liam, how did you overcome your own fear of speaking English? I know you've mentioned that you were once in the same position as many of our listeners, feeling nervous or insecure about speaking. Can you share what that was like and what helped you get past those fears?
Absolutely, Adam. I can definitely relate to everything you and Julia have mentioned so far because I experienced all of those fears firsthand. When I first started learning English, I was terrified of making mistakes. I was so worried that people would laugh at me or think I wasn't smart because of my poor grammar or pronunciation. I remember there were times when I would stay silent in conversations because I didn't want to risk saying something wrong. But what I came to realize over time is that the fear of making mistakes was actually holding me back more than the mistakes themselves. I wasn't giving myself the chance to learn from those mistakes because I wasn't speaking at all.
That's such an important realization, Liam. It's like you had to give yourself permission to make mistakes in order to improve.
Exactly, Julia. And once I started to allow myself to make mistakes, things started to change. I started speaking more, even if I wasn't perfect. I noticed that most people were patient and understanding, and those who weren't didn't really matter in the long run. I also learned to focus less on being perfect and more on just getting my message across. The more I practiced speaking, the more confident I became. It was definitely a process, and it took time, but overcoming that initial fear was the key to improving my English.
That's really inspiring, Liam. I think it's so important for our listeners to hear that even someone who's as fluent and confident as you are now once struggled with the same fears they might be feeling. It really shows that overcoming the fear of speaking is possible, no matter where you're starting from.
Absolutely, Adam. And I think the most important thing to remember is that it's okay to feel nervous or afraid. It's a natural part of learning. But the more you push through that fear and practice speaking, the less scary it becomes. You just have to take it one step at a time and not be too hard on yourself. As we've been talking about the different fears learners face when speaking English, it's important to dig deeper into why these fears exist in the first place. Fear of speaking a new language, like English, is often rooted in our psychology. It's not just about the language itself, but about the emotions and thoughts that come with it. One of the biggest psychological factors is the fear of embarrassment. This is something that affects so many learners. We're naturally afraid of standing out in a negative way. And when we speak a foreign language, we're putting ourselves in a vulnerable position. We might worry that we'll say the wrong word, use incorrect grammar, or mispronounce something, and that could make us feel embarrassed. The thought of others laughing at us or not taking us seriously can make this fear even stronger.
That fear of embarrassment is something I see in many students, and it's really powerful. I think what a lot of learners don't realize is that making mistakes is completely normal. Everyone goes through it, and it's part of the learning process. But when you're learning a new language, it feels much more personal. You feel like people are judging not just your words, but your intelligence or your ability to communicate. Liam, would you say that fear of embarrassment is linked to perfectionism as well? I feel like some learners want everything to be perfect before they even try to speak.
Absolutely, Adam. The fear of embarrassment and perfectionism often go hand in hand. Many learners feel like they have to speak perfectly, with flawless grammar and pronunciation, before they can even open their mouths. This mindset can be incredibly paralyzing because no one is perfect, especially when learning something as complex as a new language. Perfectionism creates this unrealistic expectation that mistakes are bad, but the truth is, mistakes are essential for progress. If you're constantly striving for perfection, you'll never take that first step to practice, and that practice is what builds confidence over time.
Liam, I completely agree with you. Perfectionism is something that I've seen in so many of my students. They put so much pressure on themselves to get everything right, and when they don't, it leads to frustration and even more fear. I had a student who refused to participate in speaking exercises because she didn't feel like her English was good enough. She kept saying, "I'm not ready yet." But the truth is, she would never feel ready because she was chasing an idea of perfection that wasn't realistic. It wasn't until we talked through her fears and gave her small, manageable speaking tasks that she started to feel more comfortable. Sometimes, it's about breaking things down into smaller steps so the fear doesn't feel so overwhelming.
That's a great point, Julia. And I think that leads us to another important reason why people fear speaking English, which has to do with culture. Depending on where someone is from, there may be different social norms or expectations around speaking and communication. In some cultures, speaking in front of others or making mistakes might be viewed more harshly, and that can make learners even more hesitant to speak. I've noticed that students from more reserved or conservative cultures often struggle with the fear of speaking more than those from cultures that are more outgoing or expressive. The cultural pressure to avoid making mistakes or to save face can add an extra layer of anxiety.
Yes, Adam, culture definitely plays a huge role in how people approach language learning. In some cultures, there's a greater emphasis on academic success, and language learning is seen as something that should be mastered quickly and without error. This creates a lot of pressure, especially for beginners. They might feel that they're supposed to be fluent after a few months or a year, and when they don't reach that level, they feel like they've failed. On top of that, shyness or introversion can amplify these fears. Some people are naturally more shy, and speaking in any situation, let alone in a second language, can be incredibly daunting. They might worry that they'll be judged or that they won't be able to express themselves clearly, so they avoid speaking altogether.
I think that's such an important point, Liam, because a lot of the time it's not just about the language, it's about the learner's personality and how they feel about communicating in general. I've had students who were incredibly intelligent and had a strong grasp of English, but because they were shy or introverted, they found it really difficult to speak in class or in social situations. One student in particular comes to mind. She was from a country where people tend to be more reserved, and she told me that growing up she was taught that it was better to stay quiet and listen than to speak up. That cultural belief made it really challenging for her to feel confident when speaking English, because she wasn't used to putting herself out there in any language, let alone one she was still learning.
Exactly, Julia. Shyness and self-doubt can be major obstacles to speaking English, even for learners who have strong language skills. I've worked with students who know all the grammar rules, have a large vocabulary, and can read and write English very well. But when it comes to speaking, they freeze up. This often comes from a fear of not being good enough or feeling like they don't deserve to take up space in a conversation. It's that inner voice telling them, "You're not ready," or "You'll mess up." And I think that's something many learners struggle with. This feeling of self-doubt that keeps them from practicing and improving their speaking skills.
And that self-doubt can be so deeply ingrained, especially if someone has had negative experiences in the past. Maybe they were laughed at for their pronunciation, or they were corrected in a way that made them feel small. Those kinds of experiences can stay with a person and create this sense of insecurity every time they try to speak. I think it's really important for learners to understand that these fears are normal and that they can be overcome with time and practice. Liam, What do you think are some of the psychological tools or strategies that can help learners move past these fears?
I think one of the most powerful tools learners can use is mindfulness. It's about being aware of those negative thoughts, like fear of embarrassment or self-doubt, without letting them take control. When a learner feels that fear rising, they can acknowledge it, but they don't have to let it stop them from speaking. It's also helpful to set realistic expectations. Instead of aiming for perfection, learners can focus on small wins, like having a short conversation with a friend or ordering food in English. These small successes build confidence over time, and as that confidence grows, the fear starts to diminish. Another important strategy is to create a supportive environment where mistakes are seen as part of the learning process, not something to be ashamed of.
That's so true, Liam. I always encourage my students to celebrate their progress, no matter how small. If they can get through a sentence without hesitating, that's a win. If they make a mistake but keep going, that's a win too. It's all about shifting the mindset from focusing on what went wrong to acknowledging what went right. And as you said, creating a supportive environment is key. I try to make my classes a safe space where students can speak without fear of judgment, and I think that makes a big difference in how willing they are to take risks and try speaking English.
I love that, Julia. It really is about creating a mindset and environment where learners feel safe to speak and make mistakes. And like you both said, fear of speaking English is not just about the language. It's about culture, psychology, personality, and so much more. Understanding these underlying reasons can help learners see that they're not alone in their fears and that there are ways to overcome them.
Now that we've explored some of the reasons behind the fear of speaking English, let's turn to the part where we give you practical tips and strategies to help overcome that fear. One of the most important things to remember is that fear doesn't disappear overnight. It takes time, patience, and regular practice to reduce it. One strategy that I've always found effective is to practice speaking English every day, even if it's just for a few minutes. The key is consistency. Speaking regularly helps you build confidence over time, and eventually, that fear starts to fade. For example, you can start with simple sentences, even if they feel basic. The goal isn't to speak perfectly, but to get comfortable using the language in real situations.
That's such a good point, Liam. I think many learners feel overwhelmed by the idea of speaking because they feel they have to say complex things right away. But starting small is really important. Focus on building simple sentences like, "How are you?" or "Can you help me?" These may seem basic, but they are actually the building blocks of conversation. When you get comfortable with these, it's easier to move on to more complex ideas. And as Liam mentioned, it's all about daily practice. I've had students who improve tremendously just by speaking English for 10 minutes a day with a friend, or even by themselves. The more you practice, the less intimidating it feels.
Exactly, Adam. And I think one of the things learners need to shift their focus on is fluency over perfection. When you're first starting out, it's tempting to try and say everything perfectly, to get the grammar, the vocabulary, and the pronunciation exactly right. But that kind of thinking actually holds you back. Instead of focusing on speaking perfectly, focus on speaking fluently. Fluency is about being able to express your thoughts and ideas clearly, even if it's not perfect. Mistakes are part of that process, and they are okay. I always tell my students that making mistakes is one of the best learning tools they have. Every mistake is a chance to learn and improve.
I couldn't agree more, Julia. Mistakes are not something to be afraid of. They're essential for progress. In fact, I would say that embracing mistakes is a critical mindset shift for overcoming fear. One thing that helped me when I was learning English was seeing mistakes as opportunities. For instance, when I made a mistake, instead of feeling embarrassed, I tried to focus on what I could learn from it. Over time, This made me much more comfortable speaking because I wasn't so afraid of getting things wrong. Remember, no one speaks perfectly all the time, even native speakers. The important thing is that you're communicating, and that's what fluency is all about.
That's right, Liam. I always like to share this story with my students. I had a friend who was learning English, and he was so afraid of making mistakes that he would avoid speaking altogether. One day, we were in a cafe, and he had to order something, but he was so nervous about making a mistake that he just pointed to what he wanted. Afterward, he told me, I was scared of saying the wrong thing. And that's the thing. We often let that fear stop us from trying. But I encouraged him to order next time in English, even if it wasn't perfect. And guess what? He did. And yes, he made a small mistake, but it didn't matter. The waiter understood him, and more importantly, he overcame that fear of speaking. It's those small victories that make all the difference.
That's a great story, Adam. It really highlights how important it is to push through that initial fear and just go for it. Something I always recommend to my students is practicing speaking in front of a mirror. It may sound simple, but it's a great way to get used to hearing yourself speak English without the pressure of an audience. When you see yourself speaking and hear the words coming out of your mouth, it helps build confidence. Plus, you can practice your pronunciation and get more comfortable with the way you sound in English. Another tip is to use language learning apps that have speaking features. Apps like these allow you to practice in a low-stakes environment, and you can get instant feedback, which helps you improve over time.
Yes, practicing in front of a mirror is a fantastic exercise, Julia, and language apps are also really helpful, especially for people who don't have someone to practice with regularly. But I also think it's important to practice speaking with friends or language partners whenever possible. One of the best ways to overcome the fear of speaking English is to have real conversations, even if they're short. You don't have to talk for an hour. Start with just 5 or 10 minutes. The more you speak, the less scary it becomes. And don't forget, your friends or language partners are likely to be supportive and encouraging, which can make the process much less intimidating.
I agree, Liam. Practicing with someone else gives you the chance to experience real conversations, and it's much more dynamic than speaking alone or using an app. Plus, it teaches you how to listen and respond, which is a key part of becoming fluent. Another thing I'd like to mention is that speaking English doesn't always have to be formal. It's okay to have casual, relaxed conversations. The more comfortable you get speaking in informal situations, the easier it will be to speak in more formal settings, like meetings or presentations. So, whether you're chatting with friends, practicing in front of a mirror, or using an app, make sure you're giving yourself the space to speak English in different contexts.
And let's not forget about relaxation techniques, which can be really useful if you feel nervous before speaking. One technique that I've found really effective is deep breathing. When you're nervous, your body reacts. And you might feel tense, your heart might race, and you could even start to sweat. But taking a few deep breaths can help calm your nerves. Before you start speaking, take a moment to breathe deeply in and out, slowly. It sounds simple, but it helps your body relax. And when your body is calm, your mind can focus better on what you want to say. This technique is especially helpful if you have to speak in public or in front of a group.
That's such a valuable tip, Julia. I used to feel incredibly nervous before speaking English in front of a group, and deep breathing really helped me. I would take a few moments before I started speaking to calm myself down, and it made a huge difference. Another thing I did was positive visualization. I would imagine myself speaking clearly and confidently, and it helped me believe that I could actually do it. Our mindset plays a huge role in how we perform, so if we can visualize success, it becomes much easier to achieve it. It might sound a little strange at first, but it really works. Try visualizing yourself having a successful conversation in English. Picture yourself speaking fluently and being understood. This kind of mental preparation can go a long way in overcoming fear.
I love that, Liam. Visualization is such a powerful tool because it helps shift your focus from fear to success. When you can see yourself succeeding, it feels more attainable. And, like you both mentioned, taking care of your body and mind before speaking is crucial. Sometimes we forget that our physical state, like how tense or relaxed we are, can affect how we speak. That's why techniques like deep breathing or even stretching before speaking can be helpful. It's about preparing both your body and mind for the task at hand, so you're not overwhelmed by nervous energy.
That's so true, Adam. And I think that's why it's also important to create a routine or ritual before you practice speaking. Whether it's deep breathing, visualization, or even listening to a motivational song, having a routine can signal to your brain that it's time to focus and speak confidently. Over time, as you practice, that routine will help you feel more relaxed and prepared. It's all about finding what works best for you and making it a habit.
Exactly, Julia. Overcoming the fear of speaking English is a journey, and it takes time. But with daily practice, embracing mistakes, and using these strategies, it becomes easier. The key is not to let the fear stop you from speaking. Every time you practice, you're one step closer to fluency. And remember, even if you feel nervous or make mistakes, the fact that you're trying means you're already succeeding.
All right, listeners, now we're going to switch things up a bit. One of the best ways to overcome the fear of speaking English is through role-playing conversations. This is a simple yet powerful technique because it gives you the chance to practice speaking in a safe and structured way. So, Julia and I are going to do a little role-play to show you how this works. We'll pretend to be two people meeting for the first time. This is a very common situation in daily life, whether you're meeting someone at a party, at work, or even in a class. Pay close attention to how we introduce ourselves and keep the conversation going, and then we'll discuss how you can use role-playing to practice on your own.
That's right, Adam. Role-playing is such a great tool because it simulates real-life interactions in a low-pressure environment. You can practice different types of conversations, whether it's meeting someone for the first time, ordering food at a restaurant, or asking for directions. It helps you get used to speaking in different situations, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll become. So, let's get started.
Okay, let's say we're at a conference and we're meeting for the first time. Here we go. Hi, I'm John. It's nice to meet you.
Hi, John. I'm Emily. Nice to meet you too. Are you here for the conference?
Yes, I am. I'm really excited about it. What about you? What do you do?
I work as a graphic designer. I love creating new designs and working on creative projects. What about you?
That sounds really interesting. I'm a software developer. I build apps and websites, and I've been doing it for about 5 years now.
Wow, that's amazing. I've always been curious about how apps are made. It sounds like a lot of fun, but also very challenging.
It can be challenging, but I enjoy it. There's always something new to learn. Have you been to this conference before?
No, this is my first time, but I've heard great things about it. I'm looking forward to the workshops. What about you?
It's my second time here. The workshops are really helpful, especially if you're looking to network and learn new skills.
That's good to hear. Maybe I'll see you at one of the workshops.
Definitely. It was nice talking to you, Emily. I hope you enjoy the conference.
Nice talking to you too, John. Take care.
So that's an example of a simple, everyday conversation you might have when meeting someone new. Notice how we kept the conversation going by asking questions and sharing a little bit about ourselves. It's all about taking small steps and staying relaxed. Now, Liam, what do you think? How can beginners use role-playing like this to improve their speaking skills?
That was a great example, Adam and Julia. One of the key things beginners can take away from this is that role-playing helps them get comfortable with real-life situations in a controlled way. By practicing conversations like this, you're not only improving your speaking skills but also building your confidence. One thing I always tell my students is to practice these scenarios out loud as often as possible. Even if you don't have someone to practice with, you can do it on your own. For example, you can imagine you're meeting someone for the first time, just like in the role play you two did. Go through the conversation in your head or say it out loud. Over time, you'll notice that it becomes easier and less scary to speak in real situations.
That's such great advice, Liam. I remember when I was learning a new language, I would practice role-playing by myself or with friends all the time. It really helped me feel more confident when I actually had to speak in real life. And the great thing about role-playing is that you can practice different kinds of conversations, not just meeting someone for the first time. You can practice ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, or even making small talk. The more scenarios you practice, the more prepared you'll feel when those situations happen in real life.
Exactly, Julia. And the beauty of role-playing is that you can tailor it to your specific needs. If you know you'll be traveling soon, you can practice conversations you might have at the airport or at a hotel. Or if you're going to a job interview, you can role-play how to introduce yourself and answer common questions. This type of practice helps you feel more comfortable with the language, and it also helps reduce the anxiety that often comes with speaking English in new or unfamiliar situations.
That's a great point, Liam. It's all about preparing yourself for the kinds of conversations you'll actually have in your daily life. And for our listeners, don't worry if it feels a little strange at first. It's totally normal to feel awkward when you're role-playing by yourself or even with a friend. But the more you do it, the more natural it will feel. And like Liam said, you can practice in so many different contexts. If you're going to a restaurant, for example, you can practice ordering your food or asking the waiter for recommendations. The key is to keep practicing these small conversations so that when you're in a real situation, you feel ready.
Absolutely, Adam. And I think it's important to mention that you don't have to do these role plays perfectly. In fact, making mistakes during role play is a good thing because it gives you a chance to learn. Let's say you're role-playing ordering food at a restaurant, and you make a mistake with the vocabulary or the grammar. That's okay. You can stop, think about what went wrong, and try again. This kind of practice helps you identify areas where you need improvement, and it also builds your confidence because you're learning in a low-pressure environment.
That's a really important point, Liam. Role-playing is all about practice and progress, not perfection. It's a safe space where you can try out new words, phrases, or grammar without worrying about making mistakes. And like Adam said earlier, it can feel a little awkward at first, but that's okay. The goal is to get more comfortable speaking English, and role-playing is a great way to do that. Plus, if you can find a friend or a language partner to practice with, it becomes even more fun. You can take turns playing different roles and giving each other feedback. It's a really effective way to improve your speaking skills.
And for those of you who don't have a language partner or friend to practice with, don't worry. You can still get a lot out of practicing on your own. For example, you can practice speaking in front of a mirror or even record yourself. Listening to your own voice can help you notice things you might want to improve, like pronunciation or intonation. The important thing is to keep practicing, whether you're alone or with someone else. The more you practice speaking English, the more confident and fluent you'll become.
Exactly, Adam. Role-playing is just one of many tools you can use to overcome the fear of speaking English. By practicing real-life scenarios, you're not only improving your language skills, but also building the confidence you need to speak up in real conversations. So, to all the listeners out there, I encourage you to try role-playing. Pick a scenario that feels relevant to you, whether it's introducing yourself, ordering food, or making small talk. Practice it over and over until it feels natural. And don't forget, Mistakes are part of the process, so embrace them and learn from them.
And remember, the more you practice, the better you'll get. Role-playing is a powerful tool for building confidence, improving your speaking skills, and preparing for real-life conversations. So, don't be afraid to give it a try. You might be surprised at how much progress you make.
Now that we've talked about practical strategies and role-playing, let's delve into something equally important: creating a positive mindset for learning English. Having the right mindset can significantly influence how you approach speaking and learning the language. One of the foundational aspects of this is positive self-talk. It may sound simple, but the way we talk to ourselves can have a profound impact on our confidence. When you're about to speak English, instead of saying, "I'm going to mess this up," or "What if they can't understand me?" try reframing those thoughts into something more supportive, like, "I am doing my best," or "It's okay to make mistakes because that's how I learn." By changing the narrative in your mind, you create a more supportive environment for yourself to grow.
Absolutely, Liam. Positive self-talk is such a powerful tool, and it goes hand in hand with developing what we call a growth mindset. A growth mindset is the belief that our abilities and intelligence can be developed through dedication and hard work. When it comes to learning English, this means understanding that making mistakes is not a failure. Instead, it's a valuable part of the learning process. Each mistake you make is an opportunity to improve. So instead of viewing a mistake as something negative, try to see it as a stepping stone toward mastery. When you adopt a growth mindset, you become more resilient and open to challenges, which can significantly reduce the fear of speaking English.
Exactly, Adam. Embracing a growth mindset is essential not only for language learning, but for life in general. It's about celebrating your progress, no matter how small it may seem. Remember, every expert was once a beginner. So, when you encounter difficulties in speaking or understanding English, remind yourself that these challenges are just part of your journey. Keep pushing forward, and you'll be amazed at how much you can achieve with consistent effort and a positive attitude.
That's great advice, both of you. I'd like to add that setting small, achievable goals can also play a crucial role in building a positive mindset. When you have specific, manageable goals, it becomes easier to track your progress and celebrate your successes. For example, instead of saying, "I want to speak English fluently," try setting a goal like, "I want to introduce myself in English and have a short conversation with a friend." This goal is specific, achievable, and provides a clear target to aim for. Once you achieve that goal, you can set another one, such as sharing a simple story or describing your day in English. These small wins can boost your confidence and motivate you to keep going.
That's an excellent point, Julia. Celebrating those small victories is essential. Each time you reach a goal, take a moment to acknowledge what you've accomplished. This practice reinforces the idea that you are making progress and helps build your confidence over time. Whether it's successfully ordering a meal in English or completing a language exercise, recognizing your achievements fuels a positive mindset.
And to build on that, remember that the journey of learning a language is often not a straight line. There will be ups and downs, and that's completely normal. The key is to stay focused on your goals and maintain a positive attitude, even when things get tough. Surround yourself with supportive people who encourage you, whether they are fellow learners or friends and family. Having a supportive community can make a significant difference in how you feel about your learning journey.
Exactly, Adam. Engaging with a community can provide you with additional motivation and create a positive learning environment. You can join language exchange groups, online forums, or even social media groups focused on English learning. Sharing your experiences, challenges, and successes with others can help you realize that you're not alone in this journey. Plus, it gives you a chance to practice speaking in a more relaxed setting.
And remember, it's perfectly fine to ask for help. When you encounter difficulties or feel stuck, reach out to your peers, teachers, or online communities for support. They can provide guidance, encouragement, and even practical tips that you might not have considered. Asking for help is a sign of strength and a willingness to learn, so don't hesitate to do it.
Another powerful tool for fostering a positive mindset is visualization. Spend a few moments each day visualizing yourself speaking English confidently in various situations. Picture yourself engaging in a conversation, expressing your thoughts clearly, and enjoying the interaction. This practice can help reduce anxiety and boost your self-confidence, making it easier to speak when the time comes.
And let's not forget about self-care. Taking care of your physical and mental well-being can significantly impact your learning. Make sure to get enough rest, stay active, and engage in activities that make you happy. When you feel good about yourself, you're more likely to approach challenges, like speaking English, with a positive attitude.
That's so true, Julia. It's essential to have a balanced approach to learning. Remember, the goal of learning English is not just to speak perfectly, but to communicate effectively and enjoy the process. Embrace your unique learning style, be patient with yourself, and keep that positive mindset at the forefront of your journey.
So, to wrap up this section, remember that building a positive mindset is an ongoing process. Practice positive self-talk, adopt a growth mindset, set achievable goals, celebrate your victories, and seek support from others. By creating a positive environment for yourself, you'll find that the fear of speaking English begins to fade, and you'll be able to express yourself more freely.
Yes, you all have the potential to become great English speakers, and it all starts with your mindset. Believe in yourself, stay motivated, and remember that every step you take brings you closer to your goals. Keep practicing, and soon you'll be speaking English with confidence.
Thank you, Adam and Julia, for this opportunity to share my journey. It's always a bit surreal to reflect on my experiences as an English learner because, like many of your listeners, I faced numerous challenges along the way. I remember vividly my first real encounter with speaking English. I was in a language class, and our teacher asked us to introduce ourselves in front of the group. When my turn came, my heart raced, my palms got sweaty, and I felt completely frozen. I stumbled over my words and felt embarrassed when I mispronounced my name. In that moment, I thought, I'll never be able to speak this language fluently. It was tough to shake off that feeling of failure, but I soon realized that this was just the beginning of my journey.
It's so relatable, Liam. Many learners feel that same anxiety when speaking for the first time. What helped you push through that initial fear?
Great question, Adam. For me, the turning point came when I decided to change my approach to learning. Instead of focusing solely on grammar and vocabulary, I began to seek out real-life opportunities to practice speaking. I joined a local English speaking club where people from different backgrounds would gather to chat. It was a supportive environment, and although I made mistakes, everyone was understanding and encouraging. I remember one particular night when I engaged in a conversation about our favorite movies. It was so enjoyable, and I didn't even realize how much time had passed. That was a breakthrough moment for me, realizing that speaking English could actually be fun.
That sounds like a pivotal experience. How did that realization affect your confidence moving forward?
It made a world of difference, Julia. I began to see mistakes not as failures, but as learning opportunities. After that night, I challenged myself to speak English at least once a day. It could be as simple as ordering coffee at a cafe or striking up a conversation with a stranger. Each small interaction helped to chip away at my fear, and with every conversation, I felt my confidence grow. Of course, there were still moments of self-doubt, like when I faced a situation where I had to speak with native speakers who spoke very quickly or used slang. In those moments, I would remind myself of my progress and how far I had come since that first class.
It's inspiring to hear how you embraced those challenges. Can you share any specific challenges you faced after gaining some confidence?
Certainly. Even after I started feeling more comfortable, there were still challenges. For instance, I struggled with certain accents and dialects, which made it difficult to understand at times. I remember one incident where I was in a group discussion and one of the participants had a strong regional accent. I couldn't catch what he was saying and felt embarrassed to ask him to repeat it. However, instead of hiding my discomfort, I decided to be open about it. I said, "I'm sorry, but I'm having a hard time understanding. Could you please speak a bit slower?" Surprisingly, the group appreciated my honesty, and it turned into a productive conversation about language differences. That experience taught me the value of communication and honesty in learning.
What a valuable lesson. It's amazing how embracing vulnerability can foster connections and learning.
Exactly, Julia. One of the most important takeaways from my journey is that perseverance is key. There were countless times when I felt like giving up, especially when progress seemed slow or when I faced setbacks. But each challenge I encountered was a chance to grow. I learned to celebrate small victories, whether it was completing a conversation without hesitation or finally understanding a podcast without looking up every word. Those moments kept me motivated and reminded me that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint.
That's such a powerful message, Liam. Perseverance truly makes a difference in any learning journey.
Absolutely. It's also important to surround yourself with supportive people who believe in you and your ability to learn. I found friends and mentors who encouraged me, offered constructive feedback, and celebrated my successes. Having that support system helped me stay accountable and motivated, especially during difficult times. It's a reminder that no one has to go through this journey alone.
That's wonderful advice, Liam. As we wrap up this section, what final thoughts do you have for our listeners who might be struggling with their own fears of speaking English?
I would say, don't be too hard on yourself. Everyone learns at their own pace, and it's completely normal to feel scared or insecure at times. Embrace your journey, and remember that each step, no matter how small, is a step in the right direction. Seek out opportunities to practice, celebrate your achievements, and don't hesitate to reach out for support. You are capable of overcoming your fears, and the more you speak, the more confident you will become. Believe in yourself and keep pushing forward. You've got this.
Welcome back, everyone. We're excited to dive into our next segment, where we answer some questions from our listeners about overcoming the fear of speaking English. We received quite a few insightful questions, and we appreciate everyone who took the time to reach out. Let's start with our first question.
The first question comes from Maria in Brazil. She asks, I often worry about making mistakes while speaking English, especially in front of others. How can I overcome this fear?
That's a fantastic question, Maria. Many learners share this concern, and it's completely natural to feel that way. One way to overcome this fear is to reframe how you view mistakes. Instead of seeing them as failures, try to view them as essential parts of the learning process. Each mistake is an opportunity to learn and improve. For instance, when you do make a mistake, instead of focusing on the embarrassment, think about what you can take away from the experience. You could also practice speaking in a safe environment where you feel comfortable, like with friends or language exchange partners, who can give you supportive feedback.
That's great advice, Liam. Creating a supportive atmosphere is key. I also recommend keeping a journal of your progress. Write down any mistakes you made and what you learned from them. Over time, you'll be able to look back and see how much you've improved, which can boost your confidence.
Absolutely, Julia. Plus, when you make mistakes with someone who understands that you're learning, it can turn into a fun moment rather than a stressful one. Let's move on to the next question.
Our next listener is Raj from India, who asks, I feel shy when speaking English, especially with native speakers. How can I overcome this shyness?
That's a common challenge, Raj. Shyness often stems from fear of judgment, especially when you're speaking a second language. To combat this, it's helpful to remember that most native speakers appreciate the effort you're making to speak their language. One effective strategy is to practice speaking in low-pressure environments. Try joining local conversation clubs or online language exchanges where everyone is there to learn together. You can also start small by initiating short conversations in English, such as greeting someone at a coffee shop or making small talk with a colleague. Each positive interaction can gradually build your confidence.
That's a great point, Liam. I also think it helps to remind yourself that everyone has been a beginner at some point, including native speakers. They understand what it's like to learn a new language, so don't be afraid to engage with them. Now, let's hear the next question.
The next question is from Sophia in Argentina, who says, I often get nervous before speaking, even in practice situations. Are there any techniques to help me relax before speaking English?
Sophia, it's great that you're recognizing your nerves, as awareness is the first step toward addressing them. A couple of techniques can be really beneficial. One is deep breathing. Before you start speaking, take a few moments to inhale deeply through your nose and exhale slowly through your mouth. This can help calm your nerves and center your thoughts. Additionally, visualization techniques can be helpful. Picture yourself speaking confidently in a scenario you're preparing for. Imagine the words flowing easily and visualize a positive outcome. This mental rehearsal can reduce anxiety and boost your confidence.
I love that idea, Liam. Visualizing success can be a powerful tool. Another strategy is to prepare what you want to say ahead of time. If you know you'll be speaking in a specific situation, practice your key points beforehand, which can give you a sense of control and readiness.
Absolutely. Preparation can take away some of that anxiety. Now, let's move to our final question.
This one comes from Marco in Italy, who asks, how can I stay motivated to practice speaking English regularly when I feel discouraged?
Marco, staying motivated can be tough, especially when you hit a plateau in your learning. One effective strategy is to set small, achievable goals. Instead of focusing on being fluent, aim for specific milestones, such as speaking for 5 minutes a day or learning a set number of new phrases each week. Celebrate those small victories. Additionally, find topics that genuinely interest you. Whether it's discussing your favorite movie, hobby, or recent news, speaking about things you love can make the process more enjoyable. You could even record yourself talking about these topics, which will allow you to track your progress over time.
That's fantastic advice, Liam. Finding joy in the process can truly make a difference in your motivation. Also, consider connecting with fellow learners online or in person. Having a study partner can make practicing feel less daunting and more fun.
Great insights from both of you. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. We hope that our responses have provided some helpful strategies and reassurance as you work on overcoming your fears of speaking English. Remember, every step you take in your learning journey is valuable.
Absolutely. If you have more questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. We love hearing from you and would be happy to address more of your concerns in future episodes. Thank you for being part of this conversation.
As we approach the end of today's episode, let's take a moment to summarize the key points we discussed about overcoming the fear of speaking English. Throughout our conversation, we delved into the common fears that many learners face, such as making mistakes, feeling judged, and dealing with shyness. We also explored the psychological reasons behind these fears, recognizing that they often stem from embarrassment or a desire for perfection.
Exactly, Adam. We shared practical strategies and tips that listeners can use to tackle these fears, such as daily practice, shifting focus from perfection to fluency, and creating a supportive environment where mistakes are viewed as learning opportunities. Our interactive tip of practicing conversations in everyday situations can be a game changer. Additionally, we discuss the importance of developing a positive mindset and setting small, achievable goals to build confidence.
That's right, Julia. Each of these strategies is crucial for anyone looking to improve their speaking skills. Remember that the journey of learning a language is filled with ups and downs, but persistence is key. Embrace your progress, no matter how small it may seem. Every time you take a step to speak English, you're moving closer to your goals.
Well said, Liam. To all our listeners, we want to encourage you to take that first step today, even if you feel nervous. Whether it's speaking to a friend, recording yourself, or even practicing in front of a mirror, every effort counts. Remember, the more you practice, the more comfortable you will become.
And if you're looking for additional resources to support your learning, there are many fantastic tools available. We recommend listening to other English learning podcasts, reading beginner-friendly books, and exploring websites that offer interactive language exercises. Consistency is key, so make a habit of engaging with English every day.
Absolutely. Don't hesitate to reach out to fellow learners, join language groups, or use language learning apps to connect with others. The community aspect can provide motivation and encouragement as you work on your speaking skills.
As we wrap up today's episode, we want to extend a heartfelt thank you to Liam for joining us and sharing his insights and experiences with our listeners.
Thank you so much, Liam. Your journey and practical advice have inspired us all, and we're grateful for your contributions to this important topic.
Thank you for having me, Adam and Julia. It was a pleasure to discuss such a vital aspect of language learning, and I hope everyone feels encouraged to keep speaking English.
And to our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The English Globe, so you never miss an episode. We'd also love for you to share this episode with friends who may benefit from the discussion.
Join us next time when we'll be exploring another exciting topic: how to improve your listening skills in English. We'll provide tips and techniques to help you understand spoken English more effectively.
Until then, keep practicing and remember that every word you speak brings you closer to your goals. Thanks for tuning in.
Goodbye, everyone. We can't wait to see you in the next episode.